Welcome to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast with your host, Brandon Seigel. I'm a published author, speaker, entrepreneur, and private practice strategist dedicated to transforming the way that healthcare functions. This podcast is all about empowering you to create the change you want to see. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. Today, we're talking about strategies for conducting internal private practice compliance audits. I know, not fun, compliance audits, but guess what? I want you to get ahead of it. So we're going to be talking about HR. We're going to be talking about legal. We're going to be talking about billing. We're going to just unpack this whole audit trail so that knowledge is power. Let's get you knowledgeable. Let's get you powerful. Let's get you off that sofa and into maybe a vacation. And part of that is you feeling good that when you put your head on that pillow at night, your practice is safe, thriving, and ready to rock and roll. So I am covering this topic, and I think it's really important because internal compliance audits are truly a critical defensive tool for you. And with over 54 billion stolen annually through healthcare fraud schemes, regular internal audits help healthcare providers adhere to legal and regulatory standards. They identify non-compliance areas. They prevent potential risks before they become costly penalties or even legal issues. In this episode, we're talking about HR audits, medical billing audits, documentation audits, the three pillars of practice compliance. So let's start with this. Cost of non-compliance, really, really important. Healthcare organizations face more than 620 legal and regulatory requirements. You heard me right, 620. Just something as simple as an I-9 violation can result in fines exceeding $2,000 per violation. $2,000. That means that 5 I-9 violations could be $10,000. Did you know that doctors lose around $125 billion annually due to poor billing practices in the USA? $125 billion. 2 years ago, we saw a doctor that he was losing over $100,000 a month just in timely filing mistakes. I'm telling you, compliance, resources, people, and strategies are crucial when it comes to this. Non-compliance can result in financial penalties, legal consequences, loss of reimbursement, damage of reputation, and more. So here's the bottom line, ROI on your internal audits. Internal audits will catch issues before they even occur, and they help avoid financial penalties, legal consequences, loss of reimbursement, and reputation damage. And that's why we typically do a high-level medical billing audit before we ever take on a billing client, because we want to know what we're getting into. Today, I literally had a discovery call with the practice that was looking for a new medical billing solution. And we're going through it, and she literally was like, Brandon, I love everything. Like, where have you been my whole life? This seems like fit. And I said, whoa there, Tiger. I want to make sure I know what I'm getting into, and I want to make sure you're protected. So you're going to see our value before you even sign our agreement. And our agreement's month to month. So what's beautiful is I'm always earning your trust. And obviously, if something's not right, you don't need cause, you just terminate. But what I said is, I'm like, we're going to look and give you an actual practice assessment of your medical billing. We're going to look at where your holes are, where your compliance concerns are, where there's audit trail issues, etc. These are the things we need to do. This is how you get a return on investment for our practices. This is the way you should be investing in resources and tools and opportunities. Is knowledge is power, getting that data, dialing it in. And guess what? If you were to buy a car, okay, and let's say it's a used car, would you take it to a mechanic or would you trust the person that's selling the car? I would take it to a mechanic. Hire a mechanic for your private practice. Get your audits done. Medical practices should audit a minimum of 10 patient encounters per provider annually, minimum. An annual audit allows physicians, clinicians, and practice staff to identify specific coding issues, specific modifier NCCI edits. It may occur in similar submissions, the way that you're even posting money. One of the challenges I recently found in an EMR that a client was using was I can't audit anything. I go, if Medicaid came in, we'd be in trouble. This system's not allowing full transparency. So we're auditing your CMS 1500 forms. We're auditing your documentation. We're auditing your patient paperwork. We're auditing your good faith estimates. We're auditing your I-9s. We're auditing your employee patient paperwork or your employee paperwork. We're auditing all those things. Even the way that you pay someone, your payroll, your taxes, all of that is auditable. So just recognizing all those pieces. So what are the benefits of internal audits? You got proactive risk management. You're going to identify and correct issues before regulatory audits. Revenue production. You're going to reduce your claim denials. You're going to discover overpayments. You're going to identify reimbursement deficiencies. Retractions are a byproduct of you not being proactive in your audit trail. Plain and simple. Legal protection. We're going to provide evidence that mistakes were inadvertent and reasonable efforts were taken to detect fraud, if for that sake. So that doctor's practice, we found that there was some fraud. I should say it this way. We did not find fraud. We suspected that there were things that were being done that could have been interpreted as fraud. It is not for me to say something is fraud. That is what a lawyer, a judge, a Medicaid does. But when I find reason to believe that there is fraud that could be suspected, I want to flag that, change that, fix that, etc. Is it, are you knowingly doing it? Is it, all those different things we want to figure out. And so that is why we do audits. When we're auditing your human resources, and when I say we, I mean your practice is auditing, or you're hiring people, you're hiring us, or whatever that may be. I don't, just understanding we want to have internal audits. Our regulatory landscape is that HR compliance encompasses employment laws, equal employment opportunity regulations, wage and hour laws, family and medical leaves, workplace safety, anti-discrimination policies. Failure to comply can incur significant financial penalties, making HR compliance audits a best practice for companies of any size, even like work comp audits and stuff like that. The other thing is, when you're looking at things like making fair and reasonable accommodations, recently they just came out that remote work is no longer a fair and reasonable accommodation for a disability. That's an interesting new law. So what that basically means, as an example, is someone can't claim disability and therefore be able to expect that a fair and reasonable accommodation to their disability is to work remote. Whereas there was a time where that was a requirement. So just knowing these requirements is important too, because we even want to audit what accommodations you're making to employees. And are you being fair, reasonable, and consistent? I'm going to say that again. When it comes to HR, we want to be what? Fair. We want to be reasonable. We want to be consistent. Consistent. So with employee classification and documentation, guess what we're auditing? We're going to audit your employees. We're going to audit if you have contractors. We're going to audit our I-9 forms, that they're being stored separately from employee files and accessible to government auditors. We're going to audit misclassifying employees. Examples of that, exempt versus non-exempt, employee versus contractor can result in serious violations. We're going to audit rest and meal breaks. We're going to audit paid sick leave in some states. We're going to audit overtime compliance from non-exempt employees, making sure they're getting the overtime, making sure, all those different things. What we're also going to audit? We're going to audit that your benefits are fair, reasonable, and consistent for all employees. These are all different things that we want to audit. We want to audit how you're doing raises, if there's any discrimination in your raise review process, if there's any discrimination in your termination process. We're going to look at your wage and hour compliance. Most states require businesses to establish payroll cycles without modification, with some requiring payment at least twice monthly. Pay equity laws in many states require salary ranges in job postings and fair compensation practices. So we even want to audit your job descriptions, your employee handbook, your payroll records. You should be keeping payroll records a minimum of 2 years for merit increases, up to 6 years for retirement documents. For benefits and leave administration, again, are we discriminating where we're allowing some to take more like leave, approved more leave than others, etc.? Businesses with 50 plus full-time equivalent must comply with ACA and FMLA requirements. These are all part of our audit checklist, including dependent eligibility audits to verify all enrolled dependents in benefit plans and ensure compliance with work comp laws, proper posting requirements, that if someone anytime a poster is updated, that every single employee is getting notified of it. These are all part of our HR audits. So really important, we want to conduct an annual HR audit with quarterly internal review. We want to use internal HR teams for smaller organizations, external consultants for objectivity, or legal counsel for complex issues. Here are the main key risk areas to monitor: recruitment and hiring practice to ensure fair and consistent procedures, background checks and reference check compliance, anti-discrimination policies and harassment prevention training, medical records confidentiality, retention periods, HIPAA training annually, etc. Now, when we jump to medical billing audits are essential tools for achieving compliance and safeguarding your revenue. This is all with AAMA, there's American Association of Medical Audit Specialists that can do this. There's AAPC that will do these audits. And then there's also billing companies that do this audits. We're looking at provider health records, aligning them with appropriate medical policies, with appropriate billing documentation, patient documentation, internal policy documentation, billing documentation, all in sync. So here are some key areas I want you to think about, just current regulatory environment. HIPAA rules, updated coding standards, payer-specific policies, new CMS guidelines, they're requiring more precision than ever. We must ensure we are looking at all different navigating parties to look at cross-referencing it as well. Minor errors like outdated coding usage or missed documentation can trigger costly denials, audits, and fraud investigations. So even this week, Blue Cross in, I think it was like 18 states, I think it was 18. I don't have that exact number, but somewhere around there. They updated their policy on documentation related to coding. How time had to be documented. These are things that you got to stay on top of, because now you got to make sure it actually was dated July 1st. And if you're seeing it in November, let's say, holy cannoli, I got to go back and make sure everything from July 1st forward represents what that new policy is. OCR has initiated 2024 to 2025 HIPAA audits, reviewing 50 covered entities, compliance with security rule provisions most relevant to hacking and ransomware attacks. We need to look at our contractual obligations. So in our audit process, we're going to review your contracts. We're going to review your provider handbooks. We're going to comb that thing like it's a frizzy hair and make it straight, because there's so much that gets lost in translation and you're missing the mark in that. So we have to look at prospective audits taking place before claims are sent to payers, retrospective audits conducted after claims are paid, with all overpayment handled according to payer repayment guidelines. We want to look at the OIG. They're recommending auditing minimum 10 patient encounters per provider, 5 to 10 random medical records per physician. We're using random sampling for standard compliance audits. So RAT stats for focused audits where paybacks may be necessary. When we're looking at this from a billing audit standpoint, we want to audit our patient information verification, want to make sure our IDs, demographics, coverage, validity for date of service. We want to make sure all the demographic info is accurate. We want to make sure all of the patient paperwork has every field that is required based on that payer's responsibility in their contractual obligations. Like there are specific fields that must be completed by the patient. We need coding accuracy. So we want to review the coding. We want to see it not only on a billing form, but we want to look at it in documentation. We want to make sure the most up-to-date modifiers, NCCI edits, and correct number of units are billed. We want to assess compliance with ICD-10, make sure we're utilizing the right primary treating diagnostics and that any diagnostic codes are backed with medical data. We want to make sure that the procedure codes are allowed to be utilized in correlation with that ICD-10 from a coding classification standpoint so that there's accuracy and that there's consistency. We want to make sure we have documentation support, reviewing documentation completeness, ensuring medical records provide the essential support for billed services. I also recommend a peer-to-peer review. I think that every quarter you should have every clinician, physician, whatever, take on 3 to 5 other clinicians and do that 5 to 10 chart review, giving them a checklist of everything to look for. We want to make sure that we are compliant with HIPAA. We want to make sure that we are maintaining robust internal controls, role-based access, audit trails, and security measures. When we're reviewing our contracts, we want to understand what the contractual obligations are, what documentation requirements are, what time-based requirements are, what policies, procedure requirements are, any caps that may be missed, any requirements that and how that should be documented, all part of our process. So here are some high-risk areas I want you to think about. I find a lot of audits are finding E&M codes. Physicians are overbilling on the EMN approach that they take. There's high cost procedures. We got to make sure that new versus existing patients we're looking at. Telehealth is something that's heavily being audited, and the emergency department utilization. So I'm seeing a higher risk, especially in urgent care audits. We're seeing a lot of E&M issues in the urgent care world because there's a lot of upcoding occurring. So we want to remedy overcoding, upcoding, uncoding, unbundling habits. We want to make sure we're aware of code overuse. So sometimes in the therapy space, I'm seeing code overuse. We're using certain codes like therapeutic activity too often. These are things we want to keep an eye on. And then documentation deficiencies. Inappropriate unbundling of services and other fraudulent billing practices, whether intended or unintended, is a very high risk area. So the foundation of quality of care comes down to documentation. We want to make sure we're clinically auditing the quality improvement process in patient care. Looking at our current practice, identifying the defects and the deficits, how far it is from current standards, then applying modification where necessary. And that's why we bring in outside help. Everyone that I've ever referred to AAPC for an audit has told me it was the best money they ever spent. They got documentation audits, they got coding audits. Effective documentation is essential for maintaining the high standards of clinical practice. And that's why whenever someone says they hate documentation, I'm like, documentation is how we get paid. We actually don't get paid for delivering the service. We get paid for documenting that we delivered the service. Very interesting from that standpoint. So when we're looking at our audit framework, we're going to look at some standards, including completeness, essential details such as patient history, diagnosis, and treatment plans must be recorded properly. Accuracy, documentation must support the medical necessity of the services. A lot of the time when I am seeing medical necessity be questioned, it's a combination of the diagnostic code that is being utilized with how the documentation translates to that diagnosis code. So I come into a practice, and let's just pick on physical therapy. If I were to audit your practice and I say, hey, you use this diagnostic code, and I look at all the documentation has no connection to that diagnostic code. And I'm like, well, what made you pick that diagnostic code? Well, I know it gets covered. I go, yeah, but there's no medical necessity because you're not showing in your documentation how it relates to the diagnostic code you're utilizing. So making sure we're accurate. Compliance. We want to make sure our records are all being stored in a HIPAA compliant, payer specific way. Some of us are using additional documentation that is on paper. When you're using paper, you better make sure you're storing it compliantly. You better be careful with how you're doing, because sometimes, like, I'll audit a speech practice and they're doing all of their evaluations with protocols that are on paper, and they are not storing them correctly. And sometimes they're actually not even storing them. Sometimes they're scanning them in, but some payer sources are requiring the original paper trail, however, it was originally documented. So just knowing that in your provider handbook, how they want that too. So when we're looking at clinical documentation audits, I want you to define your audit topic, set shared measurable criteria and standards based on evidence-based principles, okay? We need to understand our organizational policies that could impact that audit, including billing practices, clinical protocols, etc. We need to have a data collection method. Prospective audits are more expensive, but allow accurate design and realistic description of current practices. Retrospective audits use past clinical documentation, and they're faster, but often have suboptimal informational quality because you may be following bad procedures, so to speak. When we're looking at our review standards, use standardized tools. So some will use the Royal College of Physicians standard for physicians with 9 parameters graded as excellent, good, poor, or not satisfactory. Include office-specific documents, templates, forms, and encounter forms in your review process. With smaller practices, something that I want you to recognize is that you got to have a practical approach. So phase 1, foundation building. We need to establish internal compliance audit programs with policies, procedures, and training. We need to designate a practice staff person responsible for that audit process. We need to create a compliance calendar to ensure no crucial deadlines are missed. We need to make sure we have a risk assessment. Conducting risk assessment is crucial to pinpoint your vulnerable areas so that you are targeting the right attention areas. We need to use data mining to compare billing frequencies against other providers in the same specialty. And we want to create a risk assessment matrix using a 5x5 grade format with probability and severity axes. The third thing we need to look at is our audit execution. So in this, we need to gather relevant documentation. We want to assess compliance. We want to identify gaps. We want to implement the corrective measures. We always have to be training. By providing ongoing training and education to all our staff members, compliance policies and procedures continue to improve. And most of all, pretty simple, we must have a detailed record of our compliance efforts. We want to ensure that if we were ever audited, there's no gross negligence. We want to show that we've made every attempt within a reasonable doubt to follow compliance protocols. And that includes audit findings, corrective actions, etc. So when we're looking at staffing and resource allocation, we need to look at whether it's better to do an internal audit or an external audit. Strong internal chart audits programs detect insufficient documentation and improper coding. So an internal chart audit might come through your different clinicians, physicians, etc. External audits provide impartial third-party insights and eliminate potential conflicts of interest. Regular internal audits enable comprehensive compliance programs. They reduce the risk and improve operational efficiency. So I'm a big believer that we do an external audit at least every 2 years, and we do an internal audit annually with quarterly check-ins. Qualified personnel. Most medical auditors are experienced medical coders with advanced training in medical coding, terminology, clinical documentation, and compliance. Physicians and practice staff with strong knowledge of CPT codes, RVS, and payer policies are truly invaluable. We got to make sure we have the right people. That's why I hire AAPC certified, CPCs certified professional coders, and then there's also auditors certified, billing certified, etc. These are things that make an impact in your practice. So computer-assisted audit technique, CAAT, for gathering and analyzing electronic records. That might be something that can help your practice. utilization reports from EHRs to analyze coding patterns, comprehensive compliance management platforms. They have robust document management and reporting capability. There's technology to make this easier, and AI is only going to enhance the process of this. So my recommendation would be create an audit plan, come up with a short-term 1-year plan. In year 2, I think you should be able to implement AI for some of this. It's coming down, and I think there's more opportunities for that. But consult with associations like AAPC that can bring in the professionals you need to not only build an external audit, but to create a template for an internal audit. So imagine if you hired them to come in, audit everything, give you best practices, say, these are your internal audits. You have a 2-year grace period. In 2 years, we'll come back, we'll do another external audit. It's worth it. So common compliance findings and corrective actions overall. So here are the HR compliance issues. I see major documentation gaps. I'm seeing termination without the right documentation. You must have documentation to support and build services or procedures. You must have inadequate training, education on compliance policies and procedures. You must have privacy and security weakness assessments. Lack of proper safeguard to protect your patient health information is going to get you in trouble. Failure to show that you have a regular risk assessment and addressing those identified risks is going to fail an audit. When we're billing and coding red flags, we need to look at pattern anomalies. We need to look at the consistency of what you're using. Are you using one level of E&M service routinely on higher levels? Are we routinely using modifiers without proper documentation? Are there non-compliance with coding guidelines and inaccurate billing and reimbursement as a result? Failing to properly document or bill for immunizations, ECGs, other services. Other times we're doing balance billing and we might not be able to do balance billing. So understanding if balance billing would be a compliance violation for your contracts. And so here are some remediation strategies. The first thing is take prompt action regarding discrepancies through your staff training, process enhancement, technology upgrades. I need you to write everything up and document it and date it. I need you to provide actionable feedback with the specific steps, solutions, and each identified issue that got resolved. I need you to prioritize your high-risk areas so that immediate attention is done and security vulnerabilities are removed. From a long-term standpoint, we need to conduct our regular follow-ups. We need to track progress. We need to measure effectiveness. We need to show that we've invested in compliance. We need to implement consistent trainings to ensure healthcare staff stay updated on best practices and compliance requirements. And we need to establish our continuous monitoring to ensure new risks are identified and mitigated. So here are some metrics that I like to look at when I'm measuring. So from a financial standpoint, we're looking at claims denial rates. We're looking at appeal success rates, revenue cycle efficiency improvements, reduction in compliance-related penalties, minimized claim denials, and optimized rev cycle performance. From an operational standpoint, we're measuring staff compliance training completion rates. We're measuring time to resolution for identified issues, and we're measuring improved operational efficiency through comprehensive compliance programs. And then our risk measurements are going to be our number of high-risk findings per audit cycle. We're going to measure your compliance score improvements over time, and we're going to measure enhanced financial stability and reduced legal risks. So this is a continuous process. We should be doing at least an annual audit cycle. Healthcare compliance audits should be conducted as part of an effective compliance program annually. The more frequent audits may be necessary based on identified problems. So based on the way that your annual audit is, you're going to break down any areas of problem and you're going to audit those problems on a more frequent basis to ensure those are getting resolved. Clinical audits consist of a quality loop for continuous improvement, plain and simple. So to build a sustainable compliance culture, never stop improving the practices, claims, submission, and auditing processes. The principle captures the essence of effective compliance management. Internal compliance audits are not a one-time event, but foundational elements so that both you're protecting your patients, your providers, and your staff. So, prevention is cost effective. Internal audits catch issues before they become costly penalties. Comprehensive approach required. You must have HR, billing, and documentation audits, and they work together as integrated defense strategies. When we are utilizing technology, we can enable efficiency. So there are modern tools that make compliance auditing more manageable. And ultimately, we are always looking towards key continuous improvement. So, some additional resources you may want to think about. OIG as a compliance program guidance. If you go to hhs.gov/OIG, there is an opportunity to learn from there. CMS has EMS guidelines on their website. HHS Office for Civil Rights Guidance is really important. AAPC and AHIMA are great. AHIMA, both of those are great for coding and auditing. And then legal resources, there's healthcare law attorneys for complex compliance issues that are worth investing in. And so, did you know that private practices conducting regular internal compliance audits, such as HIPAA and billing, reported a 42% lower rate of regulatory penalties compared to those with routine audits? That was from MGMA, Medical Group Management Association. That's the other thing. Join MGMA. I don't care what practice you are, OTPT, speech, physician, neurology, urgent care, dentist, you name it. MGMA is one of the best resources out there, Medical Group Management Association. So this is inspired by the great John C. Maxwell. Conduct compliance audits with diligence. Each review strengthens your business's foundation, ensuring trust and stability for the road ahead. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. Don't forget, I'm here for you. Reach out, wellnessworksmp.com. And also, you can like us, subscribe, and be part of our Facebook groups, our Instagram, and more, because together we can thrive, not just survive. Thank you for tuning in to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. I'm incredibly grateful to each and every one of you. Exciting news. We're now available everywhere, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to YouTube or anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. So watch, listen, and reach out. If you love this episode, please drop a 5-star review. It truly means the world to me. Are you looking for more ways to elevate your practice? If so, now is your chance. Reach out, go to my website, or email me at brandon@wellnessworksmp.com. And remember, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.